Billionaire is shocked when a poor maid's daughter pulls him away from his wedding. But few minutes later, everyone frees. The Grand Celestial Hotel gleamed like a jewel against the Manhattan skyline, its crystal chandeliers casting dancing lights across marble floors that reflected the wealth of everyone who walked upon them. Today, it would host the wedding of the decade, billionaire tech mogul Alexander Hayes to socialite Victoria Ashford, a union that had graced the covers of every major magazine for months. Alexander stood in the groom's suite, adjusting his custom Italian tuxedo for the 100th time. At 32, he had everything a man could want: a billion-dollar company, properties across the globe, and a beautiful fiancée from one of New York's most prestigious families. Yet as he stared at his reflection, something felt hollow inside his chest, a feeling he'd become expert at ignoring. "Stop fidgeting, darling." Victoria swept into the room without knocking, her silk robe trailing behind her like a royal train. "You look perfect, as always. Though I suppose that's why I'm marrying you. Perfection deserves perfection." Alexander forced a smile. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. Bad luck." Victoria laughed, a sound like ice tinkling in crystal. "Please. We're beyond such pedestrian superstitions. I came to remind you that Senator Morrison will be seated in the third row. Make sure you mention the infrastructure bill during your toast. Daddy says it could be very advantageous for your government contracts." As she left, Alexander's shoulders sagged. This was his life now: strategic positioning, advantageous connections, carefully curated appearances. Love had never entered the equation, though he'd convinced himself that didn't matter. Love was for dreamers. Success required pragmatism. 3 floors below, in the hotel's industrial kitchen, 27-year-old Elena Rodriguez wiped flour from her cheek as she prepared canapés alongside the regular kitchen staff. She wasn't supposed to be here. As a housekeeper, she normally worked in the guest rooms, but the wedding caterers needed extra hands, and Elena needed the overtime pay desperately. "Mama, I'm thirsty," a small voice piped up from the corner where 3-year-old Sophie sat coloring with crayons Elena had borrowed from the concierge desk. "Just a moment, mi amor," Elena called back, her heart clenching with guilt. She hated bringing Sophie to work, but her regular babysitter had canceled, and she couldn't afford to miss this shift. The medical bills from Sophie's bout with pneumonia last winter still arrived monthly, each one a reminder of how precarious their situation was. Elena had come to America 5 years ago with dreams of becoming a teacher, but life had other plans. An abusive relationship, an unplanned pregnancy, and suddenly she was alone in a foreign country with a baby and mounting debt. The hotel job paid barely enough for their tiny studio apartment in Queens, but it was honest work, and she was grateful for it. "That child shouldn't be here," head chef Bernard snapped, noticing Sophie. "This is a professional kitchen, not a daycare." "I'm so sorry, chef." "Please, I'll keep her quiet. I just need." "I don't care what you need. Take her to the staff break room. Now." Elena's eyes stung with tears as she quickly gathered Sophie and her coloring books. "Come on, baby. Let's find you a better spot." As they walked through the service corridors, Sophie's eyes grew wide at the elegant decorations visible through doorways, cascading white roses, golden ribbons, and more flowers than the little girl had ever seen. "It's like a princess castle, Mama," Sophie whispered in awe. "Yes, sweetheart. A very important wedding is happening today." Elena didn't mention that the bill for those flowers alone could have paid their rent for a year. The break room was occupied by several staff members on break, cigarette smoke thick in the air. Elena's protective instinct flared. Sophie's lungs were still delicate from the pneumonia. "Could we maybe open a window?" she asked meekly. "In this heat? Are you crazy?" one of the waiters scoffed. Elena felt trapped. She couldn't take Sophie back to the kitchen, couldn't stay in this smoke-filled room, and couldn't leave the hotel entirely, or she'd lose the shift pay. Making a quick decision, she led Sophie through a service door she'd used countless times while cleaning, one that opened to a quiet hallway near the hotel's private garden, where the wedding ceremony would take place in just 2 hours. "We'll just stay here for a bit," Elena whispered, settling Sophie on a cushioned bench hidden behind an ornate column. "You color and Mama will be right back. I need to check on something, but I'll only be 5 minutes. Don't move from this spot, okay?" Sophie nodded solemnly, already focused on her drawing of what she called the Princess Castle. Elena hurried back to the kitchen, her mind racing with worry, but knowing she had no other choice. She'd be quick, just plate a few more trays, then get back to Sophie before anyone noticed. Meanwhile, Alexander had escaped his own pre-wedding chaos and found himself walking through the hotel's quieter corridors, seeking a moment of peace before his life changed forever. He thought about the prenuptial agreement he'd signed, the merger of his company with Victoria's father's real estate empire, the dynasty they were creating. It was everything he'd worked for. So, why did it feel like walking toward a prison? His feet carried him toward the garden corridor, seeking the roses his wedding planner had insisted upon. Victoria had wanted orchids, exotic, expensive, rare, but he'd fought for roses. His mother had loved roses before she passed away 10 years ago, and it was the one personal touch he'd insisted on for this impersonal ceremony. As he rounded the corner, he stopped abruptly. A tiny girl with dark curls sat on a bench, her legs swinging several inches above the floor, completely absorbed in her coloring. She wore a faded pink dress that had been washed so many times the color was barely there, and her shoes were scuffed and too small. But she hummed happily to herself, creating her art with the focused intensity only children possess. She looked up as his shadow fell across her paper, and Alexander found himself staring into the warmest brown eyes he'd ever seen. "Hello," she said simply, as if billionaires in designer tuxedos appeared before her every day. "Hello," Alexander replied, surprised to find himself sitting down on the bench beside her. "What are you drawing?" "The Princess Castle," Sophie explained seriously, showing him her picture. "It's the most beautiful place in the whole world. My mama says there's a wedding today. Do you know the princess?" Alexander smiled, a real smile, perhaps his first genuine one in months. "I'm supposed to marry her in a couple of hours, actually." Sophie's eyes went wide. "You're the prince." She studied him carefully, and Alexander had the uncomfortable feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. "You don't look very happy for a prince on his wedding day." The simple observation, delivered with such innocent honesty, struck Alexander like a physical blow. When had he stopped being happy? When had he stopped even asking if he should be? Before he could respond, Sophie's face suddenly changed, her eyes focusing on something behind him, filling with recognition and then immediate fear. "You," she whispered, her tiny body beginning to tremble. "You're the mean lady from before." Alexander turned to see Victoria approaching, her face twisted with disgust as she looked at Sophie. "Alexander, what on earth are you doing?" Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. "And what is this child doing here? This is a 5-star hotel, not a homeless shelter." Sophie shrank back against the bench, and Alexander felt a surge of protectiveness he couldn't explain. "She's just drawing, Victoria. She's not hurting anyone." "She shouldn't be here at all," Victoria snapped. Then her eyes narrowed as recognition dawned. "Wait, I know you. You're that maid's brat. The one who was in my suite this morning, making noise while your mother cleaned." Alexander watched as Sophie's face crumpled, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," the little girl whispered. "I try to be quiet. Mama said to be quiet." "Your mother should learn to control you properly," Victoria said coldly. "Or better yet, leave you somewhere appropriate while she works. This is exactly why these people shouldn't be allowed to have children they can't afford." The casual cruelty in Victoria's voice made something inside Alexander crack. He'd overlooked her coldness toward staff before, told himself it was just how people in their social circle behaved. But seeing it directed at a frightened 3-year-old child made him see his fiancée clearly, for perhaps the first time. "Victoria, that's enough," he said quietly but with steel in his voice. "Don't tell me you're defending this? Alexander, our guests will be arriving soon. We can't have random children wandering around." "Her name is Sophie," Alexander interrupted. "And she's not random. She's a little girl who is sitting quietly drawing a picture. You're the one who—" He didn't get to finish. Sophie, still trembling and crying, suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand with both of her small ones. "Please don't let her send my mama away," Sophie sobbed. "We need this job. Mama said we need this job to buy food and pay for our home. Please, Mr. Prince. Please don't let the mean lady hurt my mama." The desperation in that small voice, the way this child was trying to protect her mother while terrified herself, shattered something in Alexander's carefully constructed world. He knelt down to Sophie's level, gently wiping tears from her cheeks. "Nobody's going to hurt your mama," he said softly. "I promise." "Alexander," Victoria's voice was shrill now, "get away from that child and get ready. The ceremony starts in 90 minutes, and you're embarrassing yourself." But Alexander barely heard her. He was looking into Sophie's tear-stained face and seeing something he'd lost sight of years ago. Genuine emotion, real fear born from real hardship, authentic love that asked for nothing but safety and kindness. "Where's your mama now?" he asked Sophie gently. "In the kitchen. She has to work, so we can eat. But she told me to stay here because the break room had too much smoke and it makes my lungs sick." Before Alexander could respond, Elena came running down the corridor, having heard Sophie crying. When she saw her daughter with Alexander Hayes, the groom, the billionaire whose wedding she'd been helping prepare for all morning, her face went pale. "Sophie." "Oh God, Sophie, I'm so sorry, sir." She wasn't supposed to. Elena's words tumbled out in panicked Spanish and English as she reached for her daughter. Alexander stood, and for a moment, their eyes met. Elena pulled Sophie close, her heart hammering against her ribs as she faced the billionaire groom. His fiancée, the cruel woman who had reduced her to tears that morning, stood beside him with arms crossed and fury etched across her perfect features. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hayes," Elena stammered, reverting to the formal address she used with all guests. "Sophie wasn't meant to disturb anyone. I'll take her home immediately. Please, don't report this to my supervisor." "I know I shouldn't have." "You absolutely should be reported," Victoria cut in sharply. "Do you have any idea how inappropriate this is? Bringing your child to work, letting her wander the halls where our wedding guests could encounter her? This is exactly the kind of poor judgment that—" "Victoria, stop." Alexander's voice was quiet but commanded attention. He was still looking at Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What's your name?" "Elena Rodriguez, sir. I work in housekeeping. I'm truly sorry for any inconvenience." "Why is your daughter here?" The question was asked gently, without judgment, which somehow made it harder to answer. Elena felt her throat tighten with the familiar shame of her situation, the shame of never having enough, of always scrambling, of failing to give Sophie the life she deserved. "My babysitter canceled at the last minute, and I couldn't afford to miss this shift. The overtime pay from the wedding." She trailed off, knowing how it must sound to people like them, people for whom money was as common as air. "I was told to help in the kitchen, and I thought I could keep her quiet in the break room, but there was smoke, and Sophie's lungs are still recovering from pneumonia, so I just—" She couldn't finish. The exhaustion, the constant stress, the weight of trying to be everything for Sophie when she felt like nothing, it all caught up with her in that moment. Victoria made a sound of disgust. "Pneumonia? You brought a sick child into a hotel? Do you have any idea how many health codes?" She's not sick anymore, Elena said desperately, pulling Sophie tighter. The doctor cleared her. I would never endanger anyone. Please, I need this job. We need this job. You should have thought about that before you decided to have a child you clearly can't support, Victoria said coldly. Alexander, call security. I want both of them removed from the hotel immediately, and I want her employment terminated. I will not have my wedding day ruined by some irresponsible.
No.
The single word, spoken by Alexander, stopped Victoria mid-sentence. Elena watched in shock as the billionaire stepped between his fiancée and herself, a human shield she'd never expected. No. Victoria repeated, her voice dangerously soft. Excuse me? I said no, Victoria. No one is calling security. No one is being fired. And our wedding. He paused, and Elena saw something shift in his expression, like a man waking from a long sleep. Our wedding isn't going to happen. The corridor fell into stunned silence. Elena felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Surely she'd misheard. People like Alexander Hayes didn't cancel their society weddings because of people like her. Alexander, you're clearly not thinking straight, Victoria said, her voice tight with controlled rage. This is pre-wedding jitters. Let's go back to your suite, have some champagne, and… I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, Alexander interrupted. He turned to face Victoria fully, and Elena saw something in his eyes that looked like freedom. I can't marry you, Victoria. I've known it for months, maybe longer. I kept telling myself that love wasn't necessary, that a strategic partnership was enough. But watching how you just treated this child, this woman who's working herself to exhaustion to provide for her daughter, I realized something. Realized what, exactly? Victoria's face was flushed now, her composure cracking. That I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than spend it with someone who looks at a frightened child and sees nothing but an inconvenience. Someone who sees struggling people as lesser rather than as human beings worthy of compassion. He pulled the engagement ring from his pocket. He'd been about to put it on during the ceremony and held it out to her. I'm sorry, Victoria, but this ends now. Victoria stared at the ring, then at Alexander, then at Elena and Sophie. When her eyes landed on Elena, they were filled with such venom that Elena instinctively stepped back. This is because of her? Victoria's voice rose to a near shriek. You're throwing away everything we've built, everything our families have planned, for some maid and her bastard child? Victoria, Alexander's voice held a warning note. Don't you dare Victoria me. She was fully unraveling now, the polished socialite facade crumbling to reveal the ugliness beneath. Do you have any idea what you're doing? My father will destroy you. Your business partnerships, your government contracts, everything. We will crush you for this humiliation. Then crush me, Alexander said calmly. I built my company from nothing once. I can do it again. What I can't do is build a life with someone whose values are so fundamentally opposed to everything I actually believe in. Elena wanted to speak, to tell him he was making a terrible mistake, that she and Sophie weren't worth this destruction of his life. But Sophie, still in her arms, spoke first. Mr. Prince? Are you sad now? You were sad before, but now you look different. Alexander knelt down again, his eyes level with Sophie's. I'm not sad, sweetheart. For the first time in a very long time, I'm actually hopeful. Victoria let out a strangled sound of rage and disbelief. You're insane. Both of you are insane if you think this poverty-stricken maid is somehow better than. Enough, Alexander stood, his voice hard now. Leave, Victoria. The wedding is cancelled. My attorney will be in touch about dissolving our business arrangements. For a moment, Elena thought Victoria might actually strike him. Instead, she drew herself up to her full height, her face a mask of cold fury. You'll regret this, Alexander. When you're bankrupt and alone, when your name is mud in every circle that matters, you'll realize what a colossal mistake you made. And don't think for a second that I'll take you back. I'm counting on it, Alexander replied. With a final venomous look at Elena, Victoria stormed away, her designer heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. The silence she left behind was deafening. Elena stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Her presence, her daughter's presence, had just destroyed a billion-dollar wedding. The consequences would be catastrophic, not just for Alexander, but for her. Victoria would make sure she was blacklisted from every hotel in the city. How would she feed Sophie? How would they survive? I'm so sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face now. I never meant you shouldn't have. Oh God, what have I done? Hey. Alexander's voice was gentle as he stepped closer. You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault. Your wedding, your life, I've ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything, Elena. You saved me. He said it with such conviction that Elena looked up at him in confusion. I was about to marry someone I didn't love, someone who would have made me miserable for the rest of my life. I was going through the motions, building an empire while forgetting what any of it was supposed to be for. But the business consequences. Victoria's father will do exactly what she threatened, probably, Alexander acknowledged. I might lose contracts, partnerships, maybe even portions of my company. But none of that matters as much as... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you've gotten so far off track that you don't even remember what your own dreams were? Elena thought of her dreams of teaching, of helping children learn and grow. Dreams she'd abandoned when survival became her only goal. Yes, she whispered. I know exactly what that feels like. Your daughter just reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Alexander looked at Sophie, who was watching the adults with wide, curious eyes. She reminded me what real courage looks like, what real love looks like. She was terrified, but she still begged me not to hurt you. She put your safety above her own fear. She's everything to me, Elena said softly. I can see that. And watching the two of you, seeing real love, real sacrifice, real strength. He shook his head. How could I go through with a wedding built on nothing but social advantage and financial gain? I couldn't. Thanks to both of you, I won't. Before Elena could respond, the sound of raised voices echoed from the direction Victoria had gone. Moments later, Alexander's assistant, a harried-looking man in his 50s, came rushing toward them. Mr. Hayes. Sir, we have a situation. Miss Ashford is in the lobby telling the early arrival guests that the wedding is cancelled. The hotel manager is having a breakdown. The caterers want to know about payment and... He finally noticed Elena and Sophie. And I'm clearly missing some context here. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture from someone so wealthy and powerful. James, I need you to do exactly as I say. First, ensure the vendors are paid in full plus a generous bonus for their trouble. Second, arrange for the food to be donated to local shelters. All of it. Third, send formal apologies to every guest with a personal note for me taking full responsibility. Sir, the media is going to have a field day with this. Let them, Alexander said simply. Then he turned to Elena. Where do you live? The question caught her off guard. In Queens. A small apartment. Why? Because in about 30 minutes, this hotel is going to be swarmed with press, photographers, and people looking for explanations. I don't want you and Sophie caught up in that chaos. He pulled out his phone. I'm sending my car for you. The driver will take you home safely. Mr. Hayes, I can't. Please, he interrupted gently. Let me do this. It's the least I can do after. He gestured vaguely at the corridor where his wedding was supposed to have taken place. After everything. Elena wanted to argue, But Sophie was getting tired, and the thought of navigating the subway with her daughter while paparazzi swarmed the hotel was overwhelming. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." As James scurried away to handle the mounting crisis, Alexander knelt down one more time to speak to Sophie. "Sophie, I want to thank you for being brave today and for sharing your drawings with me. You helped me more than you know." Sophie, with the emotional resilience of childhood, had already bounced back from her earlier tears. "Will you really not be a prince anymore? Because you didn't marry the mean princess?" Alexander laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. "I was never really a prince, sweetheart. But maybe now I can figure out who I actually want to be." "You should be a nice prince," Sophie declared. "Nice princes are better." "I'll do my best," Alexander promised. Minutes later, Elena found herself and Sophie being escorted to a sleek black car by Alexander's driver, a kind-faced older man who helped Sophie into her booster seat with practiced ease. As they pulled away from the hotel, Elena looked back to see Alexander standing on the steps, surrounded by his assistant and hotel staff, facing the chaos he'd created with his head held high. She didn't know what would happen next, for him or for herself. But as Sophie fell asleep against her shoulder in the back of the luxury car, Elena whispered a prayer of gratitude for whatever strange twist of fate had brought them into Alexander Hayes's life at precisely the right moment. She had no idea that this was just the beginning. 3 days later, Elena sat in their tiny Queens apartment staring at her phone in disbelief. The news was everywhere, every website, every gossip blog, every social media platform. Billionaire cancels society wedding minutes before ceremony. Hayes-Ashford union ends in scandal. Tech mogul walks away from billion-dollar merger. But that wasn't what made her hand shake. It was the message from the hotel's general manager. "Due to recent events and complaints from high-profile guests, your employment at the Grand Celestial Hotel has been terminated, effective immediately." Victoria had made good on her implicit threat. Elena wasn't just fired from the Grand Celestial, she'd been blacklisted. 3 other hotels she'd applied to that morning had rejected her applications within hours, which never happened unless someone was making calls. Sophie bounced into the room, blissfully unaware of their impending financial catastrophe. "Mama, can we have pancakes for breakfast?" Elena looked at their nearly empty refrigerator and did the mental math of their remaining funds. She had enough for maybe 2 weeks of basic groceries, then rent would be due, then the medical bills. "Not today, baby. How about oatmeal instead?" Sophie's face fell, but she nodded bravely, and Elena's heart cracked a little more. She was failing her daughter. Again. The knock at the door startled them both. Elena wasn't expecting anyone. She had no family in America and precious few friends thanks to her demanding work schedule. When she checked the peephole, she gasped. Alexander Hayes stood in her dingy apartment hallway, looking impossibly out of place in his designer casual clothes. "Mr. Hayes?" she said as she opened the door, acutely aware of her own worn clothing and the apartment's shabby state. "What are you doing here? How did you even?" "I asked James to find your address," he admitted. "I hope that's not too intrusive. I needed to see you, to make sure you were all right." "I'm fine," Elena lied automatically. Then, because the stress of the past 3 days overwhelmed her careful politeness, the truth spilled out. "Actually, I'm not fine. I was fired. And not just fired. I can't get hired anywhere else either. I have 2 weeks before we're homeless, and it's all because I brought my daughter to work and you met her and—" "It's my fault," Alexander interrupted firmly. "None of this is on you, Elena. It's on me and on Victoria's vindictiveness. That's actually why I'm here." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I want to help." Elena's pride, the same pride that had kept her working 3 jobs at one point, flared. "I don't need charity, Mr. Hayes." "It's not charity. It's compensation for damages caused by my situation affecting your livelihood." He held out the envelope. "Please, just take it." Mr. Prince came to visit. Sophie appeared beside Elena, her face lighting up with delight. Did you bring drawings? Alexander's serious expression melted into a smile. I didn't, but maybe you could show me yours? Before Elena could stop her, Sophie grabbed Alexander's hand and pulled him into their cramped living room. Elena watched, mortified, as her daughter showed this billionaire her corner of their apartment. The small space with her beloved coloring books, the stuffed rabbit that used to be white but was now gray from so much washing, the collection of rocks Sophie insisted were treasures. This is my whole castle, Sophie explained seriously. It's small, but Mama says good things come in small packages. Your mama is very wise, Alexander said, settling cross-legged on their threadbare carpet with unconscious ease. Though I think your castle is perfect exactly as it is. What are you drawing now? As Sophie launched into an elaborate explanation of her latest artwork, Elena finally opened the envelope Alexander had given her. Inside was a check that made her knees weak. $50,000. I can't accept this, she said immediately, though her voice shook. This is too much. This is barely anything compared to what I have, Alexander said quietly, glancing up from Sophie's drawing. And far less than what you deserve for having your life disrupted by my drama. Please, Elena, let me do this one thing. Consider it severance pay for a job you should never have lost. Elena wanted to refuse. Every fiber of her independent, prideful being wanted to hand the check back. But she thought of Sophie, of the medical bills, of the rent due in 2 weeks, of the way her daughter sometimes went to bed hungry when money was especially tight. I'll pay you back, she whispered. I don't know how or when, but I will. There's no need. There's every need, Elena interrupted. I don't take handouts, Mr. Hayes. If you want to help, then consider this a loan. I'll pay you back every penny. Something in Alexander's expression shifted. Respect, maybe, or understanding. Then let's call it a loan if that makes you more comfortable. No interest, no timeline. Pay me back when you can. Sophie, who'd been only half listening to the adult conversation, suddenly perked up. Mr. Prince, are you lonely now? Since the mean princess went away. The question, delivered with such innocent concern, made Alexander pause. You know, Sophie, I think I probably should be lonely. But actually I feel lighter. Like I've been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. Mama says heavy feelings make your shoulders hurt, Sophie said wisely. She gets them lots. That's why I give her hugs. Sophie, Elena chided gently, embarrassed by her daughter's openness about their struggles. It's true, Sophie insisted. And hugs help. Want to try, Mr. Prince? Before Alexander could respond, Sophie wrapped her small arms around his neck in an enthusiastic embrace. Elena watched, stunned, as this billionaire, this man whose cancelled wedding was still dominating news cycles, returned her daughter's hug with such genuine warmth that tears sprang to Elena's eyes. Thank you, Sophie, Alexander said softly. That did help. He stayed for another hour and Elena still couldn't quite believe it was happening. Alexander Hayes, sitting on her worn carpet, admiring Sophie's drawings, asking about her daughter's favorite colors and foods and dreams. He didn't check his phone once. Didn't seem impatient or uncomfortable in their humble apartment. Just present. When Sophie finally ran out of steam and settled down for her afternoon nap, Elena walked Alexander to the door. Thank you, she said quietly. For the money, yes, but also for being kind to Sophie. You didn't have to come here. You didn't have to do any of this. I wanted to, Alexander replied. Then, after a pause, can I ask you something? You mentioned medical bills earlier. Is Sophie okay now? Elena nodded. She's fully recovered from the pneumonia. But the hospital bills, even with the payment plan, they're crushing. That's why I was working so much overtime, why I couldn't afford to miss that wedding shift. The American healthcare system is broken, Alexander said with surprising vehemence. Nobody should have to choose between their child's health and financial ruin. Most of the world already knows that, Elena said with a tired smile. It's just people like you. She stopped, realizing how that might sound. People like me, Alexander finished, who have enough money to never face that choice, who remain comfortably ignorant of how the other half lives. You're right. I've been guilty of that ignorance for far too long. I didn't mean. You did, and you should have. Elena, meeting you and Sophie, it's woken me up to a lot of things I've been avoiding seeing. He pulled out his phone. Can I give you my direct number? In case you need anything. Or if Sophie wants to show me more drawings, he added with a slight smile. Elena knew she should say no. She should let this strange, impossible moment end here, take the money she desperately needed, and let Alexander Hayes return to his billionaire world while she figured out her own life. Getting more involved would only lead to complications. But Sophie had taken such joy in his visit. And there was something in Alexander's eyes, a loneliness that matched her own, despite their vastly different circumstances. Okay, she heard herself say. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Elena lay awake thinking about the surreal turn her life had taken. She'd cashed the check that afternoon, paying off the most urgent medical bills and setting aside rent money with a relief so profound it made her cry. For the first time in 3 years, she could breathe. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. James found a situation that might interest you. Hartwell Academy, a private elementary school in Manhattan, has an opening for a teacher's aide. Pay is good, benefits included. They're looking for someone who speaks Spanish and English. I may have mentioned you to the headmaster. Interview is yours if you want it. Alexander. Elena stared at the message for a long moment. A teaching position, even as an aide, was closer to her dreams than housekeeping had ever been. But accepting felt like accepting more than just a job opportunity. It felt like accepting Alexander into their lives in a way that scared her. Before she could overthink it, she typed back, "Thank you. I'll take the interview." His response came immediately, "You'll be amazing. Sophie's lucky to have you as a mother." Elena fell asleep that night with something unfamiliar warming her chest. It took her a while to recognize the feeling. Hope. 6 weeks after the cancelled wedding, Elena stood in her new classroom at Hartwell Academy, watching her students work on their alphabet worksheets. The job had been everything Alexander promised and more: good pay, excellent benefits, and work she actually loved. More importantly, Sophie was enrolled in the Academy's preschool program at a significantly reduced rate for staff members. "Miss Rodriguez, I finished." Little Marcus waved his worksheet proudly. "Excellent work, Marcus. Now can you practice writing your name 5 times? As the children worked, Elena's phone buzzed with a text. She'd gotten used to these messages over the past weeks. Alexander checking in, asking about Sophie, sharing something he'd seen that reminded him of their conversations. They'd fallen into an easy friendship that still sometimes surprised her with its naturalness. Sophie mentioned wanting to see the dinosaurs at the Natural History Museum. "Would you both like to join me this Saturday?" "No pressure, just thought it might be fun." Elena smiled, about to respond, when the classroom door opened and the headmaster, Dr. Patricia Hartwell, entered with a concerned expression. "Miss Rodriguez, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Elena's heart sank as she asked her teaching partner to cover and followed Dr. Hartwell into the hallway. Had she done something wrong? Was her past as a housekeeper causing problems? "I wanted to give you a heads up," Dr. Hartwell said quietly. "We received a rather pointed call this morning from Victoria Ashford. She's a potential major donor to the school and seemed very interested in your employment here." Elena felt her stomach drop. "I see. She suggested that your position here was obtained through inappropriate means and that your connection to Mr. Hayes presents a conflict of interest." Dr. Hartwell's expression was hard to read. "I wanted you to know that I told her, in no uncertain terms, that your hiring was based solely on your qualifications and performance. You've been an exceptional addition to our staff." "Thank you," Elena whispered, relief flooding through her. "However," Dr. Hartwell continued, "I need to ask, is there something between you and Mr. Hayes that could cause complications for the school?" I'm not judging, just need to understand the situation. We're friends, Elena said honestly. He's been kind to my daughter and to me. Nothing more. But even as she said it, Elena wondered if it was entirely true. The way her heart lifted when she saw his messages, the way Sophie talked about Mr. Prince constantly, the way Alexander had started appearing in her dreams. Was that just friendship? Then I see no issue, Dr. Hartwell said firmly. Your personal life is your own, Miss Rodriguez. I just wanted you to be aware that Miss Ashford may continue to cause trouble. That evening, as Elena picked up Sophie from preschool, she found Alexander waiting in the lobby. Her daughter's face lit up like sunrise. Mr. Prince, did you come to see my classroom? I did indeed, Alexander said, scooping Sophie up with practiced ease, a gesture that would have seemed impossible 6 weeks ago. But I also came to talk to your mama about something important. Elena's pulse quickened. Is everything okay? Can we talk privately for a few minutes? Alexander asked. Maybe Sophie could show me her classroom while we discuss? 10 minutes later, with Sophie happily pointing out every drawing and toy in the preschool room, Alexander turned to Elena with serious eyes. Victoria contacted the school about you. I know. Dr. Hartwell told me. She's not going to stop, Elena. She's on a campaign to destroy both of us, and she's using her family's money and influence to do it. Alexander ran a hand through his hair in frustration. She's been blocking my business deals, spreading rumors, and now she's going after you through any avenue she can find. I can handle Victoria Ashford, Elena said with more confidence than she felt. You shouldn't have to. None of this is your fault, and I hate that you're caught in the crossfire of my broken engagement. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. There's a solution, but I need to be honest with you about my motives, which are completely selfish. What solution? Marry me. Elena's world tilted. What? Hear me out, Alexander said quickly. It would be a marriage of convenience, purely practical. Victoria's been telling everyone that I'm unstable, that I threw away our relationship on a whim, that I can't be trusted in business or personal matters. If we got married, it would show that I didn't just cancel the wedding on impulse, that I had genuine feelings for someone else. But you don't, Elena said, her voice barely audible. Have feelings for me, I mean. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. I have tremendous respect for you, Elena. And I care about Sophie deeply. I think we could build something real over time. A partnership based on mutual understanding and friendship. Like you were going to do with Victoria? The words came out sharper than Elena intended, but Alexander didn't flinch. No. Nothing like Victoria. Because, with you, I actually enjoy spending time together. Your company makes me happy. Sophie makes me happy. And practically speaking, marriage would protect you from Victoria's harassment, provide security for you and Sophie, and help repair my reputation. And what would I give up? Elena asked quietly. My independence? My self-respect? The knowledge that if someone marries me, it's because they love me, not because it's strategically convenient. You're right, Alexander said immediately. I'm sorry. This was a terrible idea, and I shouldn't have. Mr. Prince, look. Sophie called from across the room, holding up a painting. I made you a picture of a castle with a nice prince. They both turned to look at Sophie's artwork, a colorful mess of paint that might have been a building, with a stick figure that could have been anything. It's beautiful, sweetheart, Alexander called back. Then, more quietly to Elena, I'm not trying to buy you or trap you. I genuinely want to help, and I thought this might be a solution that benefited everyone. Marriage isn't a business transaction, Alexander. I know that now, he said softly. I didn't know it 6 weeks ago when I was about to marry Victoria. But you and Sophie taught me what real connection looks like. And maybe that's why I'm doing this all wrong, because what I feel for you is so different from what I felt for Victoria that I don't know how to express it. Elena's breath caught. What do you feel for me? Before Alexander could answer, Sophie came bounding over, paint smeared and beaming. "Can Mr. Prince come to dinner with us?" "Please, Mama." Elena looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Alexander's vulnerable expression, and felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "Yes," she said. "He can come to dinner." That night, in their small apartment, Alexander helped Sophie make spaghetti, while Elena set the table. It felt domestic and natural in a way that terrified her. This wasn't her world. She couldn't let herself believe it could be. But watching Alexander and Sophie together, seeing how gently he guided her small hands as she stirred the sauce, hearing him laugh at her silly jokes, Elena felt something shift in her chest. After dinner, while Sophie watched a cartoon, Elena and Alexander sat at her small kitchen table with coffee. "I need to be honest with you," Elena said quietly. "I haven't been with anyone since Sophie's father. He hurt us. Not physically, but emotionally. He made me feel worthless, like I was lucky he tolerated me. When I got pregnant, he left without a second thought." "I'm sorry," Alexander said, and she could hear the genuine anger in his voice, not at her, but at the man who'd treated her so badly. "I swore I'd never let anyone have that power over me again. I'd never depend on anyone or let Sophie get attached to someone who might leave." She met his eyes. "So, when you ask me to marry you, even for practical reasons, I'm terrified. Because Sophie already loves you. And if this goes wrong, if you decide this isn't what you want, it won't just be me who gets hurt." Alexander reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, Elena let him take her hand. "I can't promise I'll be perfect," he said. "I've spent years being emotionally closed off, making decisions based on logic rather than feelings. But I can promise that I will never intentionally hurt you or Sophie. And I can promise that what I feel when I'm with you both, this sense of rightness, of being exactly where I'm supposed to be, is real." "What if it's just the novelty?" Elena asked. "What if you're just drawn to us because we're different from your usual world? What happens when the newness wears off?" "Then I guess we'll find out together," Alexander said simply. "Elena, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that something real could develop between us. That we could build a life together that works for all three of us." Elena wanted to say no. Every self-protective instinct screamed at her to walk away before she got in too deep. But Sophie's laughter from the living room, the warmth of Alexander's hand in hers, the way he looked at her like she mattered, it all made her want to take the risk. "I need time," she said finally. "Take all the time you need," Alexander replied. "I'm not going anywhere." But 3 days later, everything changed. Elena was leaving the school with Sophie when 2 men in suits approached her in the parking lot. "Miss Elena Rodriguez? You've been served." The papers they handed her made her blood run cold. Victoria Ashford was suing her for alienation of affection, claiming that Elena had deliberately seduced Alexander and destroyed their engagement. The lawsuit demanded $5 million in damages. Elena couldn't breathe. $5 million. An amount so astronomical it might as well have been $5 billion. She'd never be able to fight this, never be able to afford lawyers good enough to battle Victoria's legal team. With shaking hands, she called Alexander. "I need your help," she whispered when he answered. I think I need to marry you after all." Alexander's lawyer, a sharp woman named Margaret Chen, sat across from Elena in Alexander's downtown office, reviewing Victoria's lawsuit with a critical eye. "It's a nuisance suit," Margaret said bluntly. "Alienation of affection claims are only recognized in a few states, and New York isn't one of them. Any competent judge will throw this out. But the legal fees to fight it," Elena began, "will be substantial," Margaret acknowledged. Which is exactly Victoria's goal. She's not trying to win. She's trying to bury you in legal costs until you're bankrupt and broken. Alexander, standing by the window overlooking Manhattan, turned back to face them. "So we don't play her game. We get married, present a united front, and make it clear that our relationship is real and serious. It undermines her entire narrative. It's still using marriage as a strategy, Elena said quietly. Maybe it started that way, Alexander replied, coming to sit beside her. But Elena, these past few weeks, you and Sophie have become the best part of my day. When I think about the future now, I see you both in it. Is that strategic? Or is it something more? Elena's heart raced. In the 3 days since being served, she'd barely slept, terror and stress eating away at her. But underneath the fear was something else. The realization that somewhere along the way, Alexander Hayes had become important to her too. If we do this, she said slowly, it has to be real. Not a business arrangement with an exit clause. Real. Real, Alexander agreed. For better or worse. I know it's fast, I know it's unconventional, but Elena, he took her hand. I'm falling in love with you. I have been since the moment Sophie grabbed my hand and begged me to protect you. I'm not asking you to love me back immediately. I'm just asking you to give us a real chance. Margaret cleared her throat delicately. I'll just go make some calls about the lawsuit. After she left, Elena and Alexander sat in silence for a long moment. Sophie asked me yesterday if you were going to be her daddy, Elena said finally. She's never had that. Never had anyone who wanted to be that for her. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know, but that you cared about her very much. Elena looked up at him. Alexander, if we do this and it doesn't work out, it will destroy her. Are you sure, absolutely sure, that you're ready for that responsibility? I've never been more sure of anything, Alexander said. Elena, I don't know how to explain this except to say that I feel like I've been sleepwalking through my life for years, and you and Sophie woke me up. The idea of going back to that existence, of losing what we're building together, that terrifies me more than any lawsuit or business loss ever could. Elena felt tears building. I'm scared. Me too, Alexander admitted. But maybe that means it matters. Maybe things worth having are supposed to be scary. I don't have a dress, Elena said, and then laughed at the absurdity of that being her concern. I mean, if we're doing this, if we're really doing this, then we're doing it right, Alexander interrupted. Not some courthouse quickie to spite Victoria. A real wedding, with Sophie as flower girl, with everyone we care about present. I want the world to know that I'm choosing you, not as a strategy, but as my future. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in a small boutique trying on wedding dresses while Sophie and Alexander's assistant James offered opinions. The lace won. Sophie insisted for the 5th time. She's right, James agreed. It's elegant but not pretentious. Very you. Elena studied herself in the mirror. The dress was beautiful. Simple ivory lace with a flowing skirt that made her feel like a princess from one of Sophie's storybooks. But it was also expensive, even with the boutique's discount. I can wear something I already own, she started to say, but James cut her off. Mr. Hayes was very specific that you should choose whatever makes you happy. And before you argue about money, he told me to tell you that this is his wedding gift to you, a dress that makes you feel as beautiful as he thinks you are. Elena felt her eyes water. He said that.
He did.
Though between you and me, he's been impossible these past 2 weeks. Constantly asking if you're sure, if you're happy, if there's anything you need. I've worked for him for 8 years, and I've never seen him care about someone's happiness the way he cares about yours and Sophie's. That evening, as Elena tucked Sophie into bed in the new apartment Alexander had insisted they move into, a safe, spacious place in a good school district, her daughter looked up at her with serious eyes. Mama, when you marry Mr. Prince, does that mean we get to keep him forever? Elena's throat tightened. Yes, baby. That's what marriage means. He'll be part of our family forever. Good, Sophie said contentedly. Because I already love him. Is that okay? It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's perfect. The wedding took place in a small garden ceremony 3 weeks after the engagement. No press, no elaborate production, just 50 people who actually mattered to them. Alexander's employees and business associates, mixed with teachers from Elena's school and the few friends she'd made in her years in America. Dr. Hartwell attended, along with Margaret Chen. Even James got misty-eyed during the ceremony. But the moment that mattered most came when Alexander exchanged vows with Elena. "I'm not good at this," Alexander began, his voice rough with emotion. "I've spent my whole life building walls, protecting myself, treating relationships as transactions. But you showed me what it means to love fearlessly. You've survived abuse and hardship and poverty, yet you still wake up every day and choose hope. You give everything to your daughter, ask for nothing in return, and somehow still find room in your heart to see the good in a man who is about to make the worst mistake of his life." Tears streamed down Elena's face as he continued. "Elena, I'm not promising you wealth or status or some fairy tale existence. What I'm promising is that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you and Sophie. I will protect you both, honor you both, and love you both with everything I have. You saved me. Now let me spend our lives making sure you never regret it." When it was Elena's turn, she pulled out the handwritten vows she'd agonized over. "Alexander, 6 weeks ago, I was a woman with no hope left. I was drowning in debt and desperation, convinced that life would never be anything but survival. Then my daughter grabbed your hand and asked you to protect me, and you did. But more than that, you saw me. Not the struggling maid or the single mother or the charity case, just me, Elena. The woman I'd almost forgotten existed underneath all the fear and exhaustion." She took a shaky breath. "You've given me back my dreams. You've given Sophie a father who adores her. You've given us both a future that feels like hope instead of dread. So I promise you this, I will never take that for granted. I will work every day to build a life with you that's based on real love, real partnership, and real trust. I will be your partner in every sense of the word. And I will love you, not because it's convenient or strategic, but because when I look at you, I see my future, and it's beautiful." When they kissed, Sophie cheered loudly, breaking the emotional tension and making everyone laugh through their tears. The reception was simple but joyful. Sophie danced with Alexander, standing on his feet as he waltzed her around the garden. Elena watched them, her heart so full it ached. "You did good," Dr. Hartwell said, appearing at her elbow with champagne. "He's one of the good ones." "I'm starting to believe that," Elena admitted. But as the sun set and guests began to leave, a commotion at the garden entrance drew everyone's attention. Victoria Ashford stood at the gate, her face contorted with rage. "This is fraud," she screamed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "A complete sham. You think I don't know what this is? A desperate maid trapping a billionaire, and him being stupid enough to fall for it." Security moved to escort her out, but Alexander held up a hand. "Let her speak." "Alexander, you don't have to," Elena began, but he squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, I do. I'm tired of letting her poison everything good in my life." He walked toward Victoria, and Elena noticed how every guest had gone silent, watching. "Victoria, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to really hear it," Alexander said, his voice calm but firm. "What you and I had was never love. It was ambition and convenience dressed up in expensive clothes. I was complicit in that. I went along with it because I thought success and happiness were the same thing. We could have been a dynasty," Victoria spat. "We would have been miserable," Alexander corrected. "You would have been miserable with someone who could never love you the way you deserved, and I would have been miserable pretending that prestige mattered more than purpose. Elena didn't trap me. She freed me. She showed me what real love looks like, what real strength looks like, what actually matters in life. She's a maid, a nobody. She's a teacher who works tirelessly to help children learn. She's a mother who sacrifices everything for her daughter. She's a woman who survived hardships you and I can't even imagine, and came out stronger and kinder for it. If that makes her a nobody, then I'll happily be a nobody alongside her. Victoria's face went from red to purple. You'll regret this. Both of you. I will make sure. You'll do nothing. Margaret Chin stepped forward, holding up a folder. Because if you continue this harassment, if you proceed with that frivolous lawsuit, if you make one more threatening statement or action against my clients, I will file countersuits for defamation, harassment, and abuse of process. Your family's money isn't infinite, Victoria, and I promise you, this firm's resources are more than sufficient to fight you for years if necessary. For the first time since arriving, Victoria seemed uncertain. She looked around at the assembled guests, all witnesses to her outburst, and some of her fury deflated. This isn't over, she said, but it sounded hollow now. Actually, it is, Alexander said quietly. I hope you find happiness someday, Victoria. Real happiness, not the kind built on other people's misery. But that journey doesn't include me anymore. Goodbye. As security finally escorted Victoria away, Elena felt Alexander's arm slide around her waist. Are you okay? He asked softly. I'm better than okay, Elena realized. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Sophie ran up and hugged both their legs. Did we win? Against the mean princess? Alexander lifted her up. We won something better than a fight, sweetheart. We won a family. As they stood together in the garden, Elena looked at her new husband and daughter and felt a profound sense of rightness. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and adjustments and moments of doubt. But they would face it together. And that made all the difference. 8 months after the wedding, Elena stood in Alexander's penthouse kitchen, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan gold. Sophie's laughter echoed from the bedroom where Alexander was helping her get dressed for school, his deep voice mixing with her high giggles in a symphony that never got old. Mama, Daddy says I can wear my dinosaur shirt to school. Elena smiled at the word daddy. Sophie had started using it within weeks of the wedding, and the first time she'd said it, Alexander had actually cried. If Daddy says so, then it must be okay, Elena called back. She'd learned that mornings were her favorite time, these quiet moments before the day began, when it was just the three of them in their home. A home that still sometimes felt surreal in its comfort and safety. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Hartwell. Your proposal for the bilingual reading program has been approved. Budget meeting next week to discuss implementation. Elena's heart soared. The program was her initiative, combining her Spanish language skills with literacy education to help immigrant children who struggled with English. Alexander had helped her develop the proposal, but he'd insisted all the credit belonged to her. Good news. Alexander appeared in the doorway, Sophie perched on his shoulders. The best news. The reading program got approved. Of course it did, Alexander said, coming to kiss her. You're brilliant. They'd be fools not to approve it. I'm going to be late if we don't leave soon, Elena said, but she was smiling. And you have that meeting with the venture capital firm at 9. About that, Alexander set Sophie down and pulled Elena close. I've been thinking about pivoting the company's focus. Less government contracts, more social impact investing. Using technology to address inequality and access issues. Elena pulled back to look at him. That's a major shift. I know. But these past months with you have changed how I see success. What's the point of having resources if you're not using them to make things better? He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You inspire me every day, Elena. Watching you work with those kids, seeing how much you care about making a difference, it made me realize I've been wasting my potential on maintaining wealth instead of creating change. What happened to the man who thought love was illogical and success was everything? Elena teased. He met a woman who showed him that love is the only truly logical choice, and that success without purpose is just expensive emptiness. Alexander kissed her forehead. Best decision I ever made was letting a brave little girl pull me away from that wedding. The commute to school had become family time. Alexander insisted on driving them both, despite having a driver, because he treasured these 30 minutes of Sophie's chatter and Elena's hand in his. Mr. Rodriguez. Marcus waved as they entered the school. He still got confused about Elena's last name, which had technically become Hayes after the marriage, though she used Rodriguez professionally. Good morning, Marcus. Ready for our reading lesson today? As Sophie scampered off to her preschool class with a kiss for both parents, Alexander lingered. I'll pick you both up at 3, he said. We have that appointment at the community center. The community center was Alexander's latest project, a tech education facility in Queens, near Elena's old apartment. They were funding it together, offering free coding classes and computer access to low-income families. It was scheduled to open next month. I still can't believe we're doing this, Elena said softly. Building something that matters? I can't believe it took me 32 years to figure out this is what I should have been doing all along. After he left, Elena settled into her classroom routine. But halfway through her reading lesson, Dr. Hartwell appeared at the door with an unusual expression. Miss Rodriguez, there's someone here to see you. In my office. Elena's stomach clenched with old fear. Was it Victoria? Some new lawsuit or harassment? But the woman waiting in Dr. Hartwell's office was a stranger, mid-50s, well-dressed, with kind eyes and Elena's nose. Elena, the woman said, standing up. My name is Carmen Rodriguez. I'm your aunt, your father's sister. Elena's world tilted. My father? She'd known so little about her father. He died when she was a baby in Mexico, before her mother brought her to America. Her mother had passed away 10 years ago, leaving Elena with almost no family history. I've been searching for you for 3 years, Carmen said, tears in her eyes. Ever since I found old letters your mother wrote to your father's family. We thought you'd stayed in Mexico with cousins, but you'd come to America instead. And then I saw your wedding announcement in the newspaper. You married Alexander Hayes, and I recognized your mother's face in yours. The next hour passed in a blur of stories and explanations. Elena learned about a whole family she'd never known existed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all in California. All searching for her. You're not alone, Carmen said, gripping Elena's hands. You've never been alone. We just couldn't find you. That evening, Elena sat in the penthouse with Alexander and Sophie, trying to process the day's revelation. You have a family, Alexander said wonderingly. Sophie has grandparents, cousins. I spent so many years thinking we were completely alone, Elena whispered. And now you have us and them, Alexander said. Sophie, you're going to have so many people to love you. Sophie, who'd been drawing quietly, looked up. Is that good, Daddy? Having lots of family? It's the best, Princess. The very best. The following weekend, they flew to California to meet Elena's family. The reunion was tearful and overwhelming. Cousins who looked like her, an uncle with her smile, a grandmother who held her face and cried. But it was Sophie who broke down the last of Elena's walls. Watching her daughter surrounded by family, laughing and playing with second cousins, being doted on by relatives who already loved her just for existing, Elena finally let herself cry all the tears she'd held back for years. You deserve this, Alexander said, holding her as she sobbed in the guest room of her aunt's house. You deserve to be surrounded by love and family and people who see how extraordinary you are. How did this become my life? Elena asked through her tears. How did I get so lucky? It's not luck, Alexander said firmly. It's grace and courage and being open to love even when it scared you. You made brave choices, Elena. This is the reward for that bravery. 6 months later, Elena stood in the community center in Queens, watching Alexander teach a coding class to teenagers. He was patient and enthusiastic, completely absorbed in helping a young boy debug his first program. Your husband is good at this, Margaret Chin said, appearing beside Elena. Almost as good as you are at teaching. We found our purpose together, Elena said. Helping people who've been overlooked by the system that gave us advantages. Speaking of which, Victoria's lawsuit was officially dismissed yesterday. Judge called it frivolous and vindictive. She's also being investigated for using family funds inappropriately to harass you. I don't want her to suffer, Elena said quietly. I just want her to move on. You're kinder than she deserves, Margaret observed. But Elena had learned that holding on to anger only poisoned her own happiness. Victoria had inadvertently given her the greatest gift, pushing her toward Alexander, toward a life she'd never imagined possible. That evening, as they tucked Sophie into bed in her princess-themed room, her choice, supported enthusiastically by Alexander, their daughter looked up at them with serious eyes. Mama, Daddy, I need to tell you something important. What is it, sweetheart? Elena asked, exchanging a concerned glance with Alexander. I love you both so much, Sophie said solemnly. And I'm really glad I grabbed Daddy's hand that day at his almost wedding. Because that's when we became a family. Elena felt tears building again. Happy tears this time. We're glad too, Princess, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved me that day. Both of you saved me. After Sophie fell asleep, Elena and Alexander stood by her bedroom door, watching her peaceful face. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked quietly. Giving up your old life, the prestige, the society connections? Alexander pulled her close. Every morning, I wake up with you in my arms and Sophie's laughter down the hall, and I think about the life I almost had. Married to someone I didn't love, chasing success I didn't really want, never knowing what real happiness felt like. And I thank God that a brave little 3-year-old girl grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go. She saw something in you that day, Elena said. Something good and true underneath all the corporate armor. She saw what you taught her to see, that people are worth taking a chance on. That love is worth the risk. Alexander turned to Elena to face him. I have something for you. He pulled out a small box and Elena's breath caught. Inside was a simple silver necklace with 3 pendants, 3 small hearts intertwined. One for you, one for me, one for Sophie, Alexander explained as he fastened it around her neck. A reminder that we're bound together now. Not by convenience or strategy or fear, but by choice. Every day, I choose you. Every day, I choose our family. Every day, I choose you too, Elena whispered, pulling him into a kiss that still made her heart race after almost a year of marriage. Later, as they prepared for bed, Elena caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror, wearing comfortable pajamas in a beautiful home, with a wedding ring on her finger and a necklace around her neck that symbolized the family she'd built. She thought about the terrified woman she'd been just over a year ago, bringing her daughter to work because she had no other choice, fired for a situation beyond her control, convinced that life would never be anything but struggle and survival. And she thought about that little girl in the faded pink dress, coloring pictures of princess castles while sitting on a hotel bench, who'd looked at a sad billionaire and asked him the simple question that changed everything. You don't look very happy for a prince on his wedding day. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when you're small and scared. Sometimes love arrives not in grand gestures, but in small hands reaching out for help. Sometimes the family you're meant to have finds you in the most unexpected ways. As Elena climbed into bed beside Alexander, he pulled her close. What are you thinking about? He asked. I'm thinking about how Sophie saved us both that day. How sometimes the smallest people have the biggest impact. How love finds a way, even when it seems impossible. She did save us, Alexander agreed. Our brave little girl who saw 2 people who needed each other and decided to help. I love you, Elena said simply. I love you too. Both of you. My perfect, unexpected family. As Elena drifted off to sleep, she heard Sophie's voice from down the hall, not awake, but talking in her dreams. And they all lived happily ever after, her daughter mumbled. The nice prince, the mama, and the little girl, together forever in their castle. Elena smiled into the darkness. Sophie was right. They had found their happily ever after. Not in a fairy tale castle, but in the life they'd built together through courage, compassion, and the simple choice to love even when it was scary. It was real, it was imperfect, and it was theirs. And that made it more magical than any storybook ending could ever be. Years later, when people asked Alexander Hayes how he'd built his most successful venture, the foundation that provided education and opportunity to underprivileged children across America, he would always give the same answer. A 3-year-old girl in a faded pink dress taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or status. It's measured in love, in courage, in the choice to see people as they really are rather than what they can do for you. Everything good in my life started the day I let her pull me away from the biggest mistake I was about to make. And when people asked Elena Hayes how she'd overcome poverty and hardship to become a celebrated educator and advocate for immigrant families, she would smile and say, "I had a daughter who believed in fairy tales, even when our life looked nothing like one. She taught me that hope is a choice, that love is always worth the risk, and that sometimes the prince you're waiting for is waiting for you too. He just needs someone brave enough to take his hand and show him the way home." But it was Sophie Hayes, now a bright 12-year-old with her mother's compassion and her father's determination, who perhaps said it best. Sometimes grown-ups forget what matters. They get sad and lost and forget that love is the most important thing. I was little, but I knew Daddy was sad. And I knew Mama needed help. So I just held on and didn't let go. Because that's what you do when you love people. You hold on even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared.